everybody? Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and tonight is the night. We have been counting down the top 25 most interesting Minnesota Vikings in training camp for a really long time. It takes a while to get through 25 different players. And even then, I still feel like I left some meat on the bone. But tonight, we will count down the top five. And number one is going to completely shock all of you. So you'll have to stay until I get to number one. But as I go through the list from five to one, uh, throw your questions, thoughts in the comments. Where are we at? Because we got a schedule today, media schedule for covering training camp. And we are about 2 weeks almost to the dot of the first time that we will walk out there and watch a certain young quarterback operate his first training camp practice as QB1. And there are so many questions that we've been asking for such a long time, the same information that we've been working with about this roster for months and talking about it in so many different ways. And now finally we will get to see actual practices, actual depth chart ish, not an official depth chart, but we'll see rep counts, who's succeeding, who's starting off hot, who's starting off cold, where everybody's playing, all the things that we love about training camp. So I cannot wait for that. Just a couple of weeks away. But until then, we got some time to talk about it. So what's on everybody's mind? Jump in the comments. Let me know what you're thinking. And I'm going to go through this list and then we will just have some fun conversation here on a beautiful July evening. So, number five on the list, and I will run down the entire list when it is finished for those of you who haven't listened to every single second of all of these podcasts, which is a huge mistake, and you can go back and listen to the analysis. But when I get to number one, I'll go through the entire list. And number five is wide receiver Rondale Moore. And the reason that you got to remember, this is the most interesting or most fascinating players at training camp, not necessarily the guys who are going to have the biggest impact on 2025. And I think with Rondale Moore, the reason that he belongs all the way up toward the top of this list is that when you go back and look at Rondale Moore and his career before last season when he got hurt as a member of the Atlanta Falcons, a very serious injury in training camp, he had started to develop as a player. When he first got into the NFL, it was actually comical because he had the lowest average depth of target in the entire NFL. And all they did was just throw behind the line of scrimmage to him. Arizona, just, all right, here's a screen. Here's a bubble. Here's a quick pass. And a very, very high percentage. Almost half of the passes that he caught were behind the line of scrimmage. And there were only two completions that he had in his first year that went over 10 yards. So this was an extremely limited wide receiver when he first got into the NFL. And even though he never put up humongous numbers with the Cardinals, the next couple of seasons, he actually did take a step forward as a route runner, as a more complete wide receiver than just the guy that was catching bubbles and running, end arounds and things like that. He was starting to go downfield more, starting to catch even some deep passes here or there, as you guys might remember. He had a 75 or 80-yard touchdown against the Vikings in 2021 in that crazy game in Arizona. But that wasn't the only thing. It wasn't just deep balls. It was more intermediate, more 8 to 10-yard quick slants, things like that. Real wide receiver stuff as opposed to a pure gadget player. And when he signed with the Atlanta Falcons, and, of course, they were bringing in Kirk and drafting Michael Penix, and they had Drake London and, so forth in that offense, it looks like there was a legitimate chance that Rondale Moore could take another step as a wide receiver if he got into that type of offense where he could do the gadget stuff, but also maybe go downfield a little more. And that ended up being actually Darnell Mooney, who became that player for the Falcons because Rondale got hurt and had to miss the entire season and is just getting back to 100%. He was not participating in mini camp outside of working on the side field with the players that are rehabbing, but looks to be on track for training camp. And I think Kevin O'Connell had mentioned that he was the only player that it was possible that he could be set back a little bit. So we start with even that. That's a great place to begin because there's multiple layers of the Rondale Moore intrigue. And it starts with, is he healthy? Is he back to the guy that once caught what, like 14 passes or something against the Minnesota Gophers in a game in college? He was a fascinating player then. I mean, a guy who had this crazy explosion on the scene in college, and then more injuries happened to him. He still gets drafted in the second round, despite essentially just having one really good year in college. That's how much people thought of his ability with the football in his hands. And maybe his arc kind of reminds you of like a Tavon Austin, who was so explosive, so much fun in college, and it never really worked out in the NFL. But where is he health wise? Because if that explosiveness is back, then suddenly he becomes maybe a guy for this team. Does he fit in a way where he adds a new layer to this offense that was missing over the last couple of seasons? Really, since KJ Osborne, they did not have a yards after catch, ball in your hands, break tackle type of guy. And I'm not even fully sure that Kevin O'Connell used Osborne to his best with that. Really, we saw that more in 2021, but that's the last time that they had a true yak guy where you can just get him a quick pass and you're talking 7 to 10 yards on average. That's what Rondale Moore could potentially bring to the table for this team. And when you think about the way that they run their offense, and I know Jalen Naylor is going to be a big part of this, and I don't think there's a wide receiver 3 competition, but there could be a rotational option that could involve Rondale Moore if he proves that they deserve to have one. And when you think about how many routes go downfield and how much space Kevin O'Connell is able to clear out using Justin Jefferson, using Jordan Addison with post routes and double moves and things like that, that really force defenses to get on their horse and get way back. I mean, that's a lot of space potentially for a Rondale Moore. So even if you were talking a best case scenario where he gets 30 passes his way and makes a few plays, the Jarius Wright role that we talk about all the time still, because he was so good at it, just getting a handful of plays and converting a first down here or there, getting an explosive here or there. That is a big potential addition to an offense that's already so complete, to even have that one extra dangerous piece if he can be that guy. But we don't really know where he's at. And this type of signing has happened many times in the past. We can run through them. We have before the Tajay Sharps, the Kendall Wrights, the Jordan Taylors, the Albert Wilsons, like this type of guy who may have had some moments with a different team. I remember when they signed Albert Wilson, I was like, oh yeah, there's a couple of seasons where this guy was pretty good, and it just never really clicked. And another part of that is with Rondale Moore, that there might be some returning ability. The Vikings right now have a very wide open punt return situation. I don't know who it's going to be. Jalen Naylor was back there. They had a couple of young guys back there. Ty Felton might get his chance, but Rondale Moore has done it before in the NFL. And I think he had too big of a role with Arizona's offense for them to want him to do it all the time. But if he was much more of a 20 snap on offense type of player per week, you could definitely have him be the punt returner, and he has the skill set to do it. I don't know so much about kick returning with him because I think kick returners these days are getting smacked around pretty good, and I think you need maybe a bigger guy. But maybe there could be a potential returning role. So in a best case scenario, Rondale Moore really adds an extra layer to this team that I think we believed Brandon Powell was going to add, and it just never really came to fruition. Powell had a couple of games there in 2023 when people were injured, but then last year just was not on the field almost at all. And he never really got into a groove with that quick pass or end around or jet sweep or anything like that. So can they actually find that role in Rondale Moore? And I think he'll be competing with Ty Felton for that type of spot. But if they both win jobs, then you feel like also with Rondale Moore's experience, maybe he could fill in for a regular wide receiver like Jalen Naylor if he needed to, or if there is a suspension for Jordan Addison. Like, it's not hard to imagine this coming to fruition and working, but it also might not. And when you have this wide range of outcomes for any player, that's how they end up on the most interesting list. So Rondale Moore, number 5, most interesting Minnesota Viking in training camp. Number 4 is Isaiah Rodgers. His first impression at minicamp and OTAs was very impressive. Picked off a pass, but just showed an explosiveness, a quickness, a speed, a fluidity that will catch your eye instantly. He's a guy that ran a sub 4.3 when he was coming out of college at his pro day, but he's a little bit bigger than somebody you'd expect. And I mean, kind of strength wise. Normally, when we talk about these blazing fast dudes, and I think he's listed, maybe he's listed in the 170s or 180s. I think he's bigger than that. And he's been in the league for a while now. And he's never had the opportunity that he's got this year. So he was with the Indianapolis Colts, but they had signed, if you remember, Xavier Rhodes, and they had some veteran corners at that time. So he was a fill in and mix in type of player and had success doing it. And then he missed the year due to the gambling thing, where, I've probably just called it the gambling thing. I should be a little more specific. What happened with Isaiah Rodgers was he was allowing somebody else to use his account that used it in a way that involved football, and that's what got him suspended. So that's kind of the story behind why he had to miss an entire season. But then he comes back with Philadelphia, wins the Super Bowl with them, plays 300 something regular season snaps, was in the playoffs quite a bit for the Philadelphia Eagles, and all of his numbers are strong. And they're all in kind of half samples. I wouldn't say that his overall sample is small. He's played about 1,300 snaps in the NFL, and the results have been good. But nobody has ever fully bought into Isaiah Rodgers as the dude, a starting outside cornerback. And there may be competition here between him and Mekhi Blackmon, or they may have them on the field at the same time. And Rodgers has the skill set of somebody that can be a little bit of more of a game changer in the secondary. Last year was about survival in the secondary and then chaos in the front seven. It was Stephon Gilmore be in the right spot, Shaq Griffin stay with somebody, be in the right spot, and then Byron Murphy doing his thing, and he was a game changer last year. But the other two positions were, let's hold on for dear life and just make sure that you're not giving up huge plays, which they did a couple times in Seattle. But aside from that, they did a good job of. Stay behind your guy, make the occasional play on the football, like Gilmore's great interception against Aaron Rodgers in London. Otherwise, just let the front seven confuse the heck out of the quarterback, rally to the football, you'll be fine. Isaiah Rodgers is a different athletic specimen than a 34-year-old Stephon Gilmore. If they had had Gilmore when he was 27, it would have been a different story. But Rodgers' speed, his burst, his ability to play in man coverage, although his numbers in zone are really good, which doesn't surprise me that Brian Flores would like him. But his ability to play in man might offer them a little bit more versatility, might offer them a little bit of, lockdown element if they need it. We know how much they change things all the time. So how does he's going to match up in training camp against some of the best wide receivers in the world? If he's going one-on-one on a daily basis against Justin Jefferson, how's that going to look? Is he going to look like a starting outside corner, or are we going to have concerns and be going into joint practices or coming out of joint practices saying, I don't know. Maybe they should have made that Jalen Ramsey trade, or maybe they should pick up Rasul Douglas, or maybe I think that all swings a lot on Isaiah Rodgers. It does also on Mekhi Blackmon, but if all of them come together and you have three starters that you feel good about, suddenly you go from, hey, the Vikings' biggest question is the secondary to like, I don't think they have a big question on this team. But if he struggles, then that question mark will remain. And you don't get a whole lot of leeway to start the season. It's at first Chicago. They've got very good wide receivers, even with questions about the quarterback. And then, like, right, out of the frying pan into the fire with the Falcons, we're going to throw the ball down the field a lot. Cincinnati's going to throw the ball down the field a lot. So you start out the season with some very good wide receivers, Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, and then Drake London. Like, they're going to be tested, these corners, right off the bat in this season. So where we end training camp with Isaiah Rodgers will give us a confidence or lack thereof in that position for the Vikings. So he is number 4 on the top 5 most interesting Vikings at training camp. And number 3, why not? Of course, the first round draft pick, Donovan Jackson. It is a good question of how much can you really figure out at training camp about a rookie guard? Like, how can you really project a rookie guard? And my answer is always you're looking for every piece of evidence. So, does he get in some preseason action? I would guess that he probably does. And on a daily basis, he's going to go up against some of the most impressive defensive tackles day after day. If he looks comfortable in there, if he doesn't look overwhelmed in there, and if we hear from teammates and coaches that it's going well and they're liking what they're seeing and there's confidence behind those words, then the Vikings might have a very, very good offensive line. I mean, they might have the best offensive line they've had in 15 years, probably. I would go back to 2009 because I don't think over the last decade they've had a dominant offensive line. I think they've had some that you could survive with, but none that were difference making. And it kind of swings on Donovan Jackson because we know what Ryan Kelly can do. Will Fry's got that contract for a reason, and those guys have worked together for a long time. We'll see about Christian Darrisaw and his health, but we know what he can do if he's back to full health. And Brian O'Neill, if Donovan Jackson is the weak link, they could probably survive it. But if he's not the weak link, then they don't have one. And then you're talking about an offensive line that would have one of the most athletic left sides in the entire league with Jackson and Christian Darrisaw. And you're talking about an interior that might be the one in the NFL out of maybe five that can actually deal with a lot of the blitzing and a lot of the stunts and things like that. If he struggles, I don't think it ruins their offensive line. If there is a natural curve to his development, then yeah, they can work their way through that. They can help him. They can, get the fullback in there sometimes, or they can put Josh Oliver on the left side and have Darisaw give a little help. You can do things if you have that single weak link. But if there's not a weak link, whoa, then look out for this Vikings offensive line. And Donovan Jackson is the swing player for that. So every bit of evidence that we can pick up of how he is performing on a daily basis. I don't think any of us are brilliant enough at football to stand on the sidelines and evaluate every single play of a left guard and know how he's going to perform in the season. So we're just looking for hints. How does it feel with the offensive line coming out of training camp? A lot of that swings on Donovan Jackson. So he will be very interesting. Number two, not a hard pick. Probably the guy I get asked about the most, Dallas Turner. Listed as an outside linebacker. What is he really? Is he going to rush the passer a lot? Are we going to see him off the edge and Andrew Van Ginkel move to the middle of the field? Or are all three going to be on the field at the same time? Is he going to rotate? I saw Kevin Seifert wrote an article about this. Like, they're going to have to get creative, was the main takeaway from Seifert's article, because you're still going to play Jonathan Grenard a ton of snaps. But can it be like, instead of a bleep ton, just a regular ton for next year? Instead of almost 1,000, can it be like 750 for Jonathan Grenard? So we're not in the fourth quarter and he's calling, O'Connell's calling timeouts so Jonathan Grenard could get back on the field because he's so gassed. I mean, it was an incredible feat for him to make that jump to playing every single play, but it's not ideal when you have a 17-game season. So does he fit in as more of a rotational rusher? Is he part of the NASCAR package of all the rushers on third down? Is he playing a linebacker role? Is he taking some of Ivan Pace Jr.'s snaps away? Is he a difference maker in coverage? We saw the interception from last year, and that was with him not even really knowing how to be a cover linebacker. Well, he's had a year now to learn that and to adapt to that. So can he actually make a difference? Can he actually cover guys one-on-one if he has to, or drop back and use his instincts and sink into his own and make a play? Or are they going to feel like, maybe we missed the boat on that one and he's got to be more of a rusher? What does it look like in training camp for his usage? And does it look like he is clicking a lot more? Because last year, I think you saw in training camp, you saw the raw skill, which is much easier to see in training camp than the nuance. Like with, just take, for example, like a wide receiver. I mean, you can see speed, you can see ball tracking. Do I know for sure if he's supposed to run a route at 8 or 10? No, I don't, because I don't know the play call, but I know if he can run it fast and if he could break it off and if he could get open, sort of the same way with a defensive player like this. We could see the burst, we could see the speed and the natural movement ability, his ability to bend and get around the edge and all that football stuff. But what we didn't know is that, he had a long way to go from a mental perspective and a development perspective to be on the field a lot more. Also, when you have one of the five best defenses in the league, sometimes I just thought there was a little too much paying attention to how much Dallas Turner was out there when they were putting together such awesome performances. It's like, you know, like when was he supposed to play when the other two guys are playing at an all pro level? But this year, there's no Patrick Jones, there's no Jahad Ward. They've moved on from some of those veterans. It is Dallas Turner's time. How does he look in his first training camp since his rookie year? And number one, folks, I don't think we need a drum roll. I don't think we need a giant curtain. It's JJ McCarthy. Yeah, it is JJ McCarthy. I mean, this was the most predictable countdown of all time. This is almost like when they do a countdown of guitar players, and number one is Jimi Hendrix. It's like, yep, a countdown of the best basketball players of all time. And number one is Michael Jordan. Well, it's the same thing with this list. It was Captain Obvious number one, JJ McCarthy. There will be a lot more to be said in the next couple of weeks as we do the official previewing training camp episodes. But I will say this right now about JJ McCarthy. I think if I were to rank, maybe this is an article, the most interesting players since I've covered the team going into training camp, because I wasn't here when Favre arrived. I think JJ McCarthy is the number one most interesting player since I started covering the team in 2016 to arrive in Minnesota. Sam Bradford was pretty fascinating in 2017 because it was his first real training camp and he lit it up. And we walked out of that thing being like, oh my gosh, this guy is just in complete control and is slinging it, and they could actually be really good. And it worked out a little bit differently than that. They were really good. And then with Kirk Cousins in 2018, when he arrived, there was weird vibes right away. Mini camp was awkward. Kirk was unhappy. John DeFilippo was unhappy. And then in training camp, the offensive line got hurt and there were a lot of bad practices. And we got the sense that something may have been amiss with the 2018 camp. So how are we going to walk out with JJ McCarthy? We've seen the extremes of this throughout the years. We've seen a lot of average camps. I mean, last year was a real arc for training camp because when it started out, Sam Darnold, I think, had his first padded practice was atrocious. And of course, we're doing reactions every single day. It's not fair. The fact that we could be there for every practice, isn't fair to the players to react to every single one, but that is what we do here. And I remember those discussions, like it was a really bad practice. And then the next day it got a little better. And then there was setbacks and then there was steps forward. And then it started to click really toward the end of training camp. He didn't even have a great joint practice against Cleveland. Myles Garrett kind of took them apart and Cleveland's defense was pretty good. So he didn't have a great joint practice. And then it started to look more comfortable after that. It was like they needed that tough moment, but maybe there was a confidence thing after McCarthy went down. Then Sam Darnold, like, okay, it's my show now. There's nobody else that's coming for this. And he looked great. And he looked really good in that one preseason game as well in the one drive, but he made a couple of wild throws. And so it wasn't until quite a bit into training camp that we started to get the sense of like something's happening here with Sam Darnold. And day after day, he started hitting downfield passes. And I remember talking to people on the outside. Like I remember last year going to Circa and talking to the owner of Circa in Las Vegas for the show. And he was on the show. And we're talking about the over under being 6.5. I was like, I don't think so, man. I don't think so. He's like, well, it's Sam Darnold. And so sometimes training camp can tell us a lot about where a quarterback stands. It often does. Where are we going to feel like with JJ McCarthy? Patience will be required. Absolutely. Especially early on, patience will be required. When the pads first come on, there's always an adjustment period. He struggled in his first couple practices last year, and he told us about how he, wears his sweats home and I don't know, to shame himself or something, and then takes them off symbolically to put it in the past. He's that kind of guy. But, he was very good at bouncing back from bad practices. So we can't really ride the roller coaster of every single practice is the truth about JJ McCarthy, but we should see this similar progression. And the joint practices are going to be the highlight of the summer. And we'll also see about preseason. I mean, there's just so many different layers to this. Like, how does he connect with Justin Jefferson? How does he look in the joint practices? How much does he play in preseason? Every single step of the way. What does the night practice look like? My reaction to the night practice podcast is usually one of my favorite of the year, but last year spoiled by JJ McCarthy's injury. But that should be really interesting. And the folks who come out for that one will get to see a glimpse of the potential franchise quarterback here. So everything is about JJ McCarthy in this training camp. The top 25 list had a lot of storylines and intrigue, and we're going to continue to preview position by position and underrated players. And I've got a Mr. Mankato list that I'm working on for Monday of kind of putting into tiers those different guys. But I mean, this thing every single day is, how does that guy look? Does he look like he's getting it? Does he look like he did last year? Is he struggling? What's he struggling with? Every step of the way, I will be there. And I'm very excited about that. In most part, because you guys are. And like the fact that there's people here watching the live show right now, the fact that, people are reading the newsletter still and all that sort of stuff. Usually around this time of year, I just see the numbers go all the way down into the tank because, of course, like you guys are on vacation and you're like, okay, whatever, we'll get to training camp eventually. That hasn't been the case. That has felt like the offseason has not stopped. Usually its end is after the draft, and then we've got like a week of analysis after the draft, and then it just goes down in the tank, and then there's some OTAs and mini camp, and then or let me know when the season starts. But not the case. Not the case this year, and I appreciate that. So, since you're all here, questions, thoughts, comments, feelings. Do you like the top five? Oh, I said I was going to show you the entire list. Okay. Let me screen share so I could just show it to you and talk through it here real quick. All right. Okay. Can I put me in the corner? How do I get in the corner? Oh, there I am. Okay. So here is the entire list. I'll start with number 25 and just count it back down for you guys. So 25 through 21 was Jay Ward, Zamiah Vaughn, Silas Bolden, Bo Richter, Gavin Bartholomew. 20 through 15, Jalen Naylor, Gabriel Murphy, Will Reichard, Max Brosmer, who I just wrote a big story on, purpleinsider.football. Make sure you go check that out. Dwight McGlothern and Jeff Okuda. Number 14, Tyrion Ingram Dawkins. 13, Sam Howell. Then Theo Jackson, Jordan Mason. And number 10 was Levi Drake Rodriguez, then Mekhi Blackman, Josh Metellus, Ty Felton, Christian Darrisaw, and again, the top five, Rondale Moore, Isaiah Rodgers, Donovan Jackson, Dallas Turner, and JJ McCarthy. So did I miss any? Is there any that you guys think that I should have had that I did not have? Or do you love the list? Do you hate the list? Let me know. All right, let's start with Ryan here. Ryan says, excited for what Blackman can bring to the table. Looked great last year. Last training camp, he was hurt, but I know what you mean. Probably 2 years ago. He looked good when he was in. Mekhi Blackman in 2023. He has, I think, a very natural way of playing. And it's a different kind of athleticism than just pure speed. Like the combine, there's combine athleticism and then there's real sports athleticism. And maybe the best way to describe this is with basketball players. Like there are some basketball players who can jump from the free throw line and dunk, and their vertical is crazy high, but then you see them get the ball and try to make a move and you go, oh, okay, that guy is a in the gym athlete, but not a real game athlete. And I think with Mekhi Blackman, when you look at his relative athletic scores, you look at his the 40, the high jump, whatever, all that stuff, not the most mind blowing. But then when you see him move and you see him play the football and you see him tackle, like, oh, okay, that is a real football player, my friends. And I think that's what Brian Flores liked about him is his work ethic. And he was a very good tackler in 2023. So I think that there is, I don't want to say a super high ceiling because that makes it sound like, oh, he's going to be the next, Patrick Surtain or something. But could he be an above average starter who's good at playing the football and is kind of, a little Rottweiler out there, kind of, guy who plays with an edge? don't want to say Antoine Winfield Jr. because or senior, because Antoine Winfield Sr. was one of the best corners of a decade and the ultimate undersized tackling guy. But, shades of that from Mekhi Blackman. It's just been so long since we've seen him that it's hard to know exactly what he's going to look like coming back. It's an ACL. It happens all the time. My expectation is that he's competing for a lot of time on the field, but that's another swing player. He and Rodgers are big swing players with small sample sizes, which of course puts them on the most interesting list. Aaron says, will Rondale be in the mix for punt and or kick returner? Punt, I can guarantee he's going to be in the mix. Kick, I don't know. What I got the sense of from Matt Daniels in minicamp when he talked was that he would love Isaiah Rodgers to be that guy who's doing the kick returning. I don't think that it's responsible to have Isaiah Rodgers doing the kick returning. And if it was the old style kick return and they were only getting 12 a year, I'd say, okay, have Isaiah Rodgers go back there and give it a shot, because you're only going to return kicks when it's either really short or when you really need just, hey, we need a burst of lightning and maybe the guy can get us a big return. But now you're going to be returning all the time. Do you want your starting outside corner to take 5 extra hits a game? I would not. So that, I think, does put Rondale Moore potentially in that conversation. But since he wasn't back to 100% yet, we didn't know, because we couldn't tell, like, is he going to be back there or not? The guys that were back there, at practice, he was not included because he wasn't practicing yet in minicamp. So we'll figure that out pretty quickly when they start to practice, like who are the guys that are in the mix for that. For punt returning, I guarantee he is, because he's done that before in his career. Not a ton, not a crazy amount, but he does have experience doing it. Ryan adds, very curious to see what changes for this run and pass game balance. Could see things being a lot more surgical, short yardage plays, the middle of the field, and deep shots off play action. So I go back and forth on this all the time, and it's something that we will pick up on in training camp. Is it going to be still a deep shot offense? One thing that I've been thinking about with JJ McCarthy, because I get, I go on other people's shows and stuff like that. People come on my show, I go on their show. And it's always the big question is, well, what's the offense going to look like? How different is it going to be? And my answer is, well, didn't KOC put together this offense for JJ McCarthy last year? I mean, he altered it and he adjusted it for Sam Darnold as the season went along. But when they were building it and teaching JJ McCarthy for the very first time what the offense is like, they were doing it with him in mind. And then, hey, Sam Darnold, like, you run it and you be QB1. But I think if JJ McCarthy, if there was a different way things had gone last year and McCarthy hadn't gotten hurt and Darnold wasn't great and they had started off, I don't know, 5-7. Let's make it even fewer games than that. How about 2-4? Then I think JJ McCarthy would have been playing and he would have been running that offense from last year. Now, what was that offense? It was downfield. It was a lot of taking advantage of arm strength, throwing into windows, throwing those in-breaking routes to Justin Jefferson 20 yards down the field. I think that he's going to ask JJ McCarthy to do that stuff. I don't know how safe they're going to be with their offense, which, look, I mean, that might result in more variance, which it always does, just like shooting threes or trying to hit home runs. But I just have a tough time seeing Kevin O'Connell invent this offense last year or shape this offense last year. Not exactly invent, but shape it for McCarthy. And then be like, oh, no, you know what? I'm going to play like Kevin Stefanski now, and we're going to throw 400 times and we're going to run 600 times. And, that's how we're going to do it and hit play action from time to time. And that's going to be our offense. That could certainly work, but I just don't think that's who Kevin O'Connell is. And I also think when you have the ultimate weapon in Justin Jefferson downfield as a contested catch monster, as somebody who can, make a play on the football at any level. I mean, are you going to start throwing underneath? Like, I don't think so. I think they're still going to push the ball down the field. Where what you're talking about is the run pass balance, though. And I do think there's going to be a lot more of that. I do think there's going to be a lot more of the running early on. when you look at last year, they were ahead in so many games early. Like you think about the Giants game, they give up what, a field goal to start the game and then never trail again. San Francisco, Houston, Green Bay, they were way up. So it looked a little more 50-50 because they were ahead in so many games early on in the season. And then as the season went along, it sort of went right back to where Kevin O'Connell usually likes it, which is more about 60-40. When they're in close games, they should be able to lean on the run game a little more. What you would like is to have some drives that are 12 plays and 6 runs, 6 passes, and maybe you hit a 20-yard pass at some point, you get a few runs that go for 3 yards, you get a few runs that go for 7 yards, and you just pound the other team's face in for a little while. That's something that's been missing from this offense since O'Connell got here. Little spurts, we can remember this moment or that moment, but not consistently. With the personnel that they have this year, they can do that a little more consistently. So I go back and forth because in one way I think, well, yeah, they should do what you're talking about with JJ McCarthy, which is they should run the ball and take deep shots off play action and stuff. But I'm also envisioning, and we saw him do it last year in training camp. So it's not just in my imagination. Like he was running the same offense as Sam Darnold in training camp last year. He was throwing downfield. He was running things out of the shotgun, guys in motion, and final drives where he's out of the shotgun for the entire time. I don't think that they have to kid gloves McCarthy just because he was in that kind of offense when he was in college. I think that they look at his arm strength and they look at his command and his leadership and his work ethic to get the offense down and his willingness to take a shot. And I think they're going to throw it. I think they're still going to throw it. Dustin says, if McCarthy has a similar season to Jordan Love's first season, would you consider that a success? Divisional round with a pretty high numbers, or does it need to be more than one playoff win? The success conversation is a little bit layered and nuanced because my first answer would be if he played exactly the same as Jordan Love. It was the same season where early on, there's some moments he looks pretty good, and then there's some moments he looks pretty bad. And this goes for the kind of like patience thing. And then the second half of the season, he looks like a star. And then they get within one drive of winning in the divisional round and one drive of going to the NFC Championship. Nobody's walking away from that season and saying, nobody. For a first season, and Jordan Love had a couple of more years to develop than JJ McCarthy, so that matters a little bit too. But how did Packers fans walk out of that season? They walked out of that season with their heads held probably a little too high, but very high about Jordan Love. I mean, they thought you've got the next Favre, you've got the next Aaron Rodgers here, and maybe they still do. I don't know. I think the ups and downs of Jordan Love are kind of who he's going to be. And when he plays 17 games, 9 of them are going to be really good and 8 of them are not going to be really good. I think that's kind of who he is as a player. But the point just being that if McCarthy at his age, which is quite a bit younger than when Jordan Love began as a starter, if he were to have that big upswing in the second half of the year and have a ton of big wins, light somebody up in a playoff game, and then lose in the last moments of a divisional round, oh, yeah. Oh, that's a success. That's a success because you're going to walk out of that season knowing that you've got this core together and that JJ McCarthy will not be expensive for at least several more years. If you look at contracts like Mahomes or Josh Allen or Burrow, it's not until year 6 that they become pretty expensive. So you're going to walk out of that going, wait, 3 more seasons, if not 4 more seasons of an extremely affordable quarterback with that level of play that he can build on and grow on and everything. Oh yeah. You're going to like that. I think where it gets a little more tricky is if JJ McCarthy comes out of the first season and the numbers are just kind of okay and they get there with the defense and there's not a lot of flashes of like, whoa, this guy, but it's pretty good. And then you're going to be asking, like, is there a next step to be taken? Because if there is, they could be really good. But if there isn't, is there a ceiling? Like, that's the hardest scenario. The scenario where he's like really bad, I just don't see happening with this setup because we've seen really bad quarterbacks have good moments. No offense to Josh Dobbs, a great human being. but not a great quarterback and has bounced around to a bunch of teams. And even he won some games with the Vikings, and Nick Mullins, same sort of thing where he put up big numbers. And so if those guys can do it, it's hard to find a scenario where this doesn't work at all. It's when it gets into that gray area of, ooh, okay, what, like, was that season good? Think about if there were like, you know, call it even the Teddy Bridgewater 2015 season. For a lot of people, I think we're really excited about Teddy Bridgewater, but the skeptics, and we'll never find out who was right, unfortunately, for Teddy. But the skeptics were like, when was it special though, right? Like, when was it really truly special? When did he flash big numbers and have huge games and, win games by himself, that kind of thing? He was the game manager with 14 touchdowns. And again, like, he looked like he was going to take another step. We never got to see it in 2016. And who knows if he was still the quarterback in 2017, how good that might have been. But if McCarthy has a similar to 2015 season as Teddy Bridgewater, I think you're going to feel pretty good about that, but you're not going to be sure where the ceiling is. If he does what Jordan Love did at a younger age with less experience, I mean, you're going to think sky is kind of the limit for the next few years for the Vikings. Hamza says, came across a graphic of every team's winning percentage since the merger, and the Vikings have the fourth worst win percentage, even ahead of the Packers. And they are the only team in the top 13 that does not have a Super Bowl win, let alone even one Super Bowl. So came to the conclusion that the reason that I think the Vikings have never won a championship is because I know what you're going to say. It's a long comment, but I'm going to read it all. They have never had a franchise quarterback. All the teams that have won Super Bowl usually have done it with a franchise quarterback. They have had elite players on both offense and defense. Yeah. So Hamza, it's amazing. Like, you and I'm only picking on you, okay? But you may be the last person on earth to have discovered this factoid. I feel like I meet random people in public who are talking about, hey, did you know the Vikings have the best record ever of any team that doesn't have a Super Bowl? I feel like my dentist said that to me or something at some point. So, yes, that is a fact. But, well, there's a few different things. I mean, your explanation, of course, is right. And I think it ties into exactly why there's so much energy and excitement for this season and this training camp, because this is the piece that's been missing forever in this franchise. I mean, you can go back to even when they had Tommy Kramer, who was a great quarterback, but there were injuries and he was in and out with Wade Wilson through the years. And you never felt like, I mean, maybe there were a couple of years where you thought that Kramer was the franchise quarterback, but the injuries and stuff in the late 80s, it wasn't exactly a sure thing. And then you get to the 90s, it's Rich Gannon. Jim McMahon shows up for a really fun year, but you're not going to have Jim McMahon for a long period of time. And it wasn't really until Dante, and think about how long that is, like for a minute there with Tommy Kramer, then all the way to Dante Culpepper. I mean, that's like, I mean, if you were a 10-year-old fan when Tommy Kramer got drafted, you're like an old guy by the time they get their next franchise quarterback, like a real adult with a mortgage and a fence and everything. And then Culpepper gets hurt. And think about that same thing. If you were 10 years old when Culpepper got hurt, you've gone through this whole thing. You're a grown up now and you still haven't seen that franchise quarterback outside of thinking it might be Teddy, or if you were a Kirk believer at the start, or ever thought that that was going to get turned around and have different results at some point. Kirk's been the closest thing, but he wasn't the guy who was drafted. He wasn't developed here. He had his warts as a complete player by the time he got here. So to your point, yes. I mean, I agree with you, of course, that a lot of the teams that win have had that franchise quarterback that you get a bunch of shots at it and eventually you get over the top. The other part is that, and we all know this, it doesn't have to be rehashed. They had some chances. Didn't take advantage of all of them. Aaron says, crazy how much has changed in a short time in the cornerback room. Booth Jr. and a Caleb Evans were hoping to prove something, and then Flores didn't like what he saw and got the guys that he thinks will work. I mean, this is a great point, Aaron, about this overhaul of the roster that's been made by this coaching staff and front office. even if we go back a year, how much is different? Go back 2 years. How many pieces are even here from 2 years ago? They have really overhauled this entire thing in, especially on defense, in Brian Flores's vision. I mean, we were talking about, DJ Wanham and Daniil Hunter as the starting edge rushers, and now it's two of the best in the league. And of course, Hunter is still incredible, but two of the best in the league that they went out and got. This is normally a difficult way to build a team, but on defense, if you identify the right guys, you can do it, and they've done it with all of these free agent players. And now they're hoping to do the same. And this is where somebody said to me not too long ago, like, that a lot of coaches are not great at scouting. So they're good at coaching X's and O's. They understand the game, but they don't all understand players' skills. And that is the, I think, most important thing that Brian Flores does is he looked at a Caleb Evans and he said, that is a guy who's a man corner who uses his size. And look, he could play off a little bit and he could tackle, but he doesn't play the football very well. He's really good at mirroring guys, but he doesn't play the football very well. And he looked at Andrew Booth Jr. and he said, that guy's soft. And that's just a fact. He was soft. He wasn't getting his hands dirty on anybody. And he was very much like an off type of corner, but you got to rally and tackle and you got to hit people if you're going to play for Flores. So he goes out and gets some of his guys as placeholders, but now these are really his guys, Blackman and Isaiah Rodgers. That's a good point, that they've changed everybody to really fit his scheme. And that even goes for where Dallas Turner is at right now. That last year you're kind of trying to put in a Patrick Jones into a position to succeed, and he did to some extent. But now it's the guy that you drafted and developed for this exact role. And that's what makes the defensive side, even with the really tough schedule, very interesting and potentially really, really good if things work out, because it's all in Brian Flores' vision. Let's see. Sean says sometimes offenses breathe a sigh of relief if when a front seven or two, oh yeah, has to get a breather for a play. Yeah, I see what you're saying. If someone in the front seven, too much depth on the Vikings front seven with the guys subbing in that are solid. We will see. We will see about that, Sean. That's an interesting point. We will see, because there is the potential there where you could see Dallas Turner being a great fill-in player. You could see Jalen Redmond emerging, Levi Drake Rodriguez emerging. Taki Taimani gets mentioned on more podcasts than he has plays in the NFL. But you could also see where it might not. And that's one of the biggest question marks going into training camp. And when we do our positional analysis, where we go position by position and talk about every storyline for each position leading up to training camp, when we get to defensive line, like that's going to be the biggest narrative is, do you really have a rotation? Is it a nasty rotation? Can you plug and play a Javon Hargrave next to Harrison Phillips? Can you put in Levi Drake Rodriguez instead of Harrison Phillips and then, put Redmond next to him and then Jonathan Allen? Or are you talking about really having to lean heavy on just a couple guys? Because the last couple years, we've discussed it in the offseason. Has it really worked out, though, for a rotation? So I think they're going to need that. They're going to need, at a couple of different positions, some younger players or some less experienced players to really rise to the challenge here. And D-line is that place. I mean, right behind, and even I'll throw Tyrion Ingram Dawkins there as well. Right behind the starters is a bunch of intrigue. Aaron says, I think Jordan Mason will be the straw that stirs the drink this year. Yeah, Jordan Mason is one of those acquisitions that gets made in the offseason, and with so many other people being signed and so much money being spent, it's easy to kind of forget Jordan Mason. Like, oh yeah, well, and they also got Jordan Mason, like an also signed instead of an also ran, and also signed Jordan Mason. But this is a guy who has averaged over 5 yards per carry for his career, has a nastiness to him, a violence to the way that he runs, also really, really fits in an outside zone type of scheme where he was great last year for the San Francisco 49ers. I would imagine the Vikings want to run something similar because Aaron Jones was always in a zone scheme as well, like a wider zone type of scheme with the Green Bay Packers, and they ran more zone with Jones on the field last year. So if he performs even somewhat similarly, even if it's 4.5 yards a carry, 4.6 or 7 yards per carry behind an offensive line that is really good at run blocking, you're right. I mean, he could be a guy that the other team just hates to see come in the game. And the best recent run game that we've seen from the Vikings is probably 2019, maybe 2020 early in the season, but probably 2019. And that was where Dalvin Cook would wear down teams. They would bring in Alexander Madison, and he proved not to be a true number one. And they had a struggling offensive line. He also may have just had the running back thing happen to him earlier than expected. But for a minute there, Alexander Madison was pretty darn effective. And that's the last time they had a really good run game where they could have a duo of, Dalvin Cook and Madison. And now with Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason, he gives you a power element that you didn't really have before. Jones is not the biggest guy. He's not running over people. He's kind of slippery as opposed to slamming down your face. And Jordan Mason can slam down your face. It really was. So Kevin O'Connell over the last couple of years has been talked about a little bit. And this has not been a Purple Insider opinion, by the way. So I think it was just unfair as being like, is this team really got an edge to it? And then when you get trounced like they did in the playoffs, that narrative's not going anywhere. I don't think that they lacked an edge because Kevin O'Connell, I don't know, like doesn't want to. I think your edge comes from your personnel. And how much he has them hit each other in practice. Look how healthy they've been. Like that's the way you should be doing it. You should be having the main goal to have people be healthy, even if it's makes for unexciting preseason games. But they didn't have an edge. I really think because they didn't have the people who had an edge. Dalton Reisner is not a guy who plays with an edge. He's a very good pass protector, but he's not shoving people around. And with Garrett Bradbury, I thought he was a really good outside zone blocking center, but it was a more finesse type of thing. Whereas Ryan Kelly's got some nasty to him. Donovan Jackson, I think he's got some nasty to him. And then Jordan Mason, he brings a violence to his game. Like they could completely reshape what we think of if Jordan Mason is what he was for the 49ers, just about like KOC and the team's identity and things like that. Because it has been it's been more of a Ferrari than it has been, a big truck or something. Maybe they want it to be a little bit more like you could tell how much I know about cars, a big truck or something. I said, I drive a Honda Civic, folks. Gas mileage though, fantastic. TL says, how many wide receivers named Moore have there been ever in NFL history? You could probably find that on Pro Football Reference. I bet you could find that. There's a few in the league right now. Rob Moore was a very good wide receiver. I think he's a receivers coach somewhere. Angel Dust Sr. with 2 Z's. Is there an let's get Angel Dust Jr. subscribed. Okay. Says, in my honest opinion, I have a feeling Blake Cashman will have a great season. Your thoughts? He had one last year, a really, really, really good season last year. The only concern I ever have about Blake Cashman is just that he plays with his hair on fire to the point of sometimes getting banged up. And that happened last year. It could definitely happen again. But the ability to cover for me with Blake Cashman was something I was so impressed with. And he had really good PFF coverage grades before when they signed him, but you just don't know. Like sometimes those things go up and down. Some years Anthony Barr would have great coverage grades. Some years he wouldn't. And if you gave up one big play or 2 big plays, it could shift that grade. So those are tricky to deal with. And you got to make sure that you understand the context. But what I saw from him, that San Francisco game comes to mind immediately, was an ability to close. So when he identified where the football was going to go, he could close on a space, on a receiver, on a target, and make an all-out play. He could get his hands on the football. He could tip the ball. I think there was a tip that turned into an interception against San Francisco that he had. There were pass breakups. And then as a blitzer, he knows how to get after it as well. But I think with Flores, like blitzing is somewhat of a talent in itself, but it's kind of something that's drawn up. coverage is something that you really cannot, I don't want to say you can't teach, but it has to have a natural skill set. It has to have a natural instinct for the game, really good understanding of opposing offenses, and then lightning quicks. His fit last year was remarkable. And I still wonder if the Vikings had played the Detroit Lions with Blake Cashman last year in the first game, if that would have turned out differently. I think it would have. And so his health is absolutely vital to this thing. And that's why they went and got Eric Wilson. So you could have a copy. You could have someone who's a really good leader. I mean, anybody who knows Eric Wilson knows like his leadership qualities are fantastic. And he was great at knowing the defense, knowing where to be when he was here before, and then did a good job for the Packers last year. So that's important. But Cashman, his health, his performance, is extremely vital to this defense. So that was an incredible signing last year. Aaron says, which three positions do you think that the depth of the position is a little weak? Quality depth is something this team hasn't had a lot with the former quarterback's contract. That is totally true. And I was just mentioning Eric Wilson. I mean, you think about last year, it was Kamu Grugier-Hill, who was a pure special teamer. And when they put him out there, he made a couple plays, but the more he was out there, the more problematic it was. The answer is going to, I think, be shown in training camp, because there's a lot of players that I'm unsure of where they stand. So I was really impressed with Dwight McGlothern, for example, last year, and with Zamiah Vaughn in minicamp. It's just minicamp, but hey, you're out there with football players making plays, so you've got my attention. Jeff Okudah is another one. And I know Rob, who watches the show, has been banging the Jeff Okudah drum, and he thinks Okudah is going to be really good for this team, but I don't know yet. And I want to see in training camp, do I feel like they have this depth with McGlothern, Okudah, potentially Zamiah Vaughn, or maybe somebody else shows up as well? Or am I going to go, I don't know. I don't know about that. If somebody gets hurt in the cornerback room, they're in trouble, which was kind of how we felt last year. And then no one really got hurt. Safety is sort of that way, even though there's some flexibility, but we don't really know what Jay Ward is. We don't really know what Theo Jackson is. Wide receiver is another one where we're still kind of trying to figure that out. Do they have a lot behind Jalen Naylor, or do they not? If Rondale Moore is back there and performing well in camp, and if Ty Felton is showing us something like, oh, well, you're going to feel like, wow, you have an abundance of wide receivers. But if those guys struggle in training camp, you're kind of going to feel like it's a little bit light if anybody goes down. So I think that we're kind of waiting on that answer. But overall, where I think it's really important, and I mentioned the D-line earlier, where I think it's really important, outside linebacker too, is on the offensive line. That's the position that's always getting banged up. It's hard to keep five guys on the field at the same time. And I do think they have good depth on the offensive line, because Blake Brandel's a guy who could come in and play a few games, and you're going to feel good about it. That's the thing with Brandel, is sometimes I would talk about his, last year's shortcomings, but he's an NFL offensive lineman who can start in 5 games if you need him to do that. And, the same kind of goes for Justin School. I'm curious to see about Michael Juergens, but this really the true answer is we're going to find out throughout this training camp. Son of a Beavers says, sometimes I envision what people who listen on the audio side and what they think when I am talking about Beavers all the time there, but it's you. Let's see. Have any thoughts on Lloyd Howell and how fast he's going to get fired from the NFLPA for his role in the collusion? Because, oh boy, did that dude and JC Treader mess up. Yeah. So I saw Kalen Kaler wrote about it, and Don Van Natta wrote about it, and Pablo Torre's been reporting it along with Mike Florio. After they got their hands on this collusion investigation that had basically been buried. I think if you are the leader of the NFL Players Association in earnest, not with particular interests like Lloyd Howell seems to have, and if you haven't kept up on this thing, Lloyd Howell was involved as a consultant with a firm that's buying portions of NFL teams, if I'm understanding that correctly, and also running the NFLPA. It's kind of a little conflict of interest, I would say. And then JC Treader had some very questionable things that were said in this investigation that got unearthed. And should have never been buried. I mean, if you were truly trying to run the NFLPA in a way that didn't seem to very much favor the owners, but in a way that represented the players properly, that investigation would have been out there a lot sooner than it actually was. If there were not things that people like JC Treader didn't want the world to find out. The way that the owners colluded against Lamar Jackson was wrong. There's no world where Dak Prescott should be making more money than Lamar Jackson, or the team should be leaking that they weren't going to go after an MVP caliber superstar quarterback when teams are paying out money to Tua and to Trevor Lawrence and so forth. So we all knew what was going on. But this has actually peeled back a much deeper curtain. So if you're into sports business, this is a fascinating situation. And now all of a sudden, it seems like the players are a little bit in peril here. They need new leadership like yesterday, like 4 years ago yesterday. And that's become quite obvious. However, if you're not into the sports business stuff and you're just waiting for training camp, which is kind of me, off we go. Like, I don't know. It can be a little bit, first of all, it wasn't surprising. It wasn't shocking. The Lloyd Howell thing was a little shocking, but the whole collusion thing was not that shocking to me. What was really, I don't know. I think it's more gross than it is shocking, but it still ends up not really getting front page treatment because we all kind of know that has gone on. And it's just hard to talk about, right? Like, well, there's this really deep business thing happening, but we're all pretty excited for football. So that's kind of where I've stood on it. I haven't spent a lot of time investigating it. Let's see. Ryan says the new Tampa 2 nickel packages this year will be interesting with extra pressure up front. Excited to see what type of disguises Brian Flores deploys. Um, I just, to me, it's about like personnel for how he's going to go about it. It's about making those pieces fit with their skill sets. Where last year it was pretty obvious with someone like Cam Bynum, just for example. Cam Bynum does one thing and he does one thing well. That is play deep safety. Now he can come up and tackle. He's great at it. He's great at identifying route combinations and he catches the football when it comes to him. But now, is Theo Jackson that role, or is Theo Jackson just on third down in a dime package and Josh Metellus is back there having to play a little more in coverage? Is Ivan Pace on the field for every snap these days, or is it going to be Dallas Turner or Van Ginkel moving around? And stuff like that, where somebody's being used, the new skill sets that they have, how much that front seven with Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave causes things on the back end to be different. So interesting to try to pick up on little details of what it's going to look like throughout training camp and then, see it play out. Son of a Beaver says, when do you think the second rounders are going to sign as 30 of 32 remain unsigned? They'll sign. I mean, there's no world where they don't. I mean, I don't know, probably soon. I stopped even thinking about all that stuff just when they put in the rookie wage scale and it made it lock everybody into basically the same contract. And then, guys fight that whole thing that the Cincinnati Shamar Stewart, what he's dealing with the Bengals, guys will try to kind of fight that whole guaranteed situation. If they cut you before the end of your contract, you still get all your guaranteed money, those details. But the team is in a pretty clear cut position with those type of things. And, I'm sure it'll be all right. Was there 32 second round draft picks? I guess it would have been. In the third round, that's where there's like 47 third round draft picks. Steven says tight end depth is suspect a bit. Backup center behind Kelly is suspect. Can't say I'm a big fan of Jay Ward. Well, you don't know anything about Jay Ward yet. You wouldn't have. I don't know either. Like, that's the thing. Like, he's been a good special teamer. That's all we really know. You wouldn't have known a lot about Josh Metellus either. So I'm interested to see if Ward starts to get in there and starts to get any opportunities. It's fair because we haven't seen him to say that that's still a question mark. And that's where I kind of pointed as well. Behind Kelly, same thing. Michael Juergens hasn't played. So I agree with you there. Tight end depth. I don't know how many teams do teams have 7 tight ends that are good. I don't know how many teams that even have 2. Honestly, how many teams even have you know, two players who can play the way the Vikings can. Josh Oliver's a legitimate starter, and we'll see if there's. I mean, that's a backup battle that is going to be something too. Ben Urasek caught a few balls, caught my eye. Bryson Nesbitt. These are guys that we'll see if you ever have to learn their names ever again. But undrafted free agents who might have a chance to do something in training camp. And Bartholomew, the 6th-round draft pick, has the best chance to be tight end 3. There are 116 players in NFL history with the last name of Moore. That's great information, but how many were wide receivers? That was the question that we're going to have to figure out. Okay, TL has Sky Moore, DJ Moore, Herman Moore. I don't know Nat Moore. I don't know who that is. Rob Moore, Elijah Moore, Lance Moore. I know all those guys. David Moore, I don't know. Chris Moore, and Ahmad Rashad's real name was Bobby Moore, or his original name. I mean, Ahmad Rashad is obviously his real name, but his name was changed to Ahmad Rashad from Bobby Moore. Well, that's a good sign that we should wrap it up, isn't it? Who is the best Moore for a wide receiver? No, it's got, well, Rob or Herman. Herman had the higher ceiling. Rob had the longer career. Okay, last question. If there's a legitimate punting competition, what happens? First winner is crowned, or Jordan Addison gets suspended. A first winner. I don't understand the second part of that. I don't think that they're. Oh, you mean of the? Okay, I see what you're saying. Like, what happens first? A winner of the punt competition is crowned, or Addison gets suspended. Now I understand. Punctuation in the comment section can throw me off, like Ron Burgundy. But I'm Ron Burgundy. I'm a punt competition. So anyway, I don't think there's a punt competition. I just don't. They can keep Oscar Chapman on the roster with the international exception. I think it's just Ryan Wright. And unless Wright struggles big time and Chapman is unbelievable, they'll probably just keep both on the roster. Wright will be the guy. And if he struggles in the middle of the season, they might make the change. And as far as that suspension goes, boy, we need to have like a Hall of Fame of dragged out stuff that we followed on the show. What is Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's contract was like in the dragged out stuff Hall of Fame, but Jordan Addison's suspension. I mean, Los Angeles, feel free to come up with an answer there so we can figure that out, whether that's going to happen or not. And remember, the NFL still could suspend him even if he is not convicted, if they want to. I don't know if they will, but we will see. That does kind of loom over this training camp, though. Is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? And I think it's still likely that it happens. So you're focused a little bit more on that wide receiver depth. But don't worry, though. I will be keeping an eye on the punting competition just for all of you. Sadly, though, Oscar Chapman did not make my top 25 list. So go over to purpleinsider.football. You can see the entire list and all the write-ups. Also, huge story on Max Brosmer today. I spent a good amount of time talking with his offensive coordinator for the Gophers and his quarterback trainer, Quincy Avery, who is from here and is one of the reasons that he is a Minnesota Viking at this time. So I wrote about that. You're right. Metellus' potential extension. Dragged out a little. That's nowhere close to the dragged out Hall of Fame, though. I mean, even TJ Hawkinson's, where we got to earaches and back injuries. People trying to trade Justin Jefferson for an entire year straight because they started negotiations early. That was dragged out Hall of Fame for sure, but certainly not the only thing that was. All right. Well, I won't drag this show out much more, but I appreciate everybody popping in to listen and watch. And next Monday, should be live next Monday. And maybe we'll do a little Mr. Mankato talk next Monday. I think that's going to be the next article that I'm working on over the weekend. So thanks everybody for watching and listening. And the countdown is on, man. We're getting closer and closer. We'll talk to you all very soon. Football.